Today, all unexpected, of course, like they usually are. Remember, Tesla Investor Day, Elon was what, 20 minutes late? We're like 15 minutes late, but we're here.
Hey, we got him beat by 5 minutes.
Yeah. We have a very special guest today who has been with us before, Jameson Cummings. He was the first Tesla technician and employee number 195. We've had him on our podcast before, and Jameson is a wealth of information. So welcome, Jameson. Good. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good afternoon. Good to meet you, Jameson.
So we're ready to roll here. We actually have a visitor. Marco Nolte was going to join us from Germany. Are you having trouble hearing us again, Jameson? It sounds like he is. He can't hear us. Okay. Guys, let's call Jameson, tell him we'll put him on next week, and we'll continue the podcast. You have my cell phone, Richard?
Yeah, Microsoft has been wonderfully glitchy for us this afternoon. I know we had everything tested and working this morning, and
I know you guys
it was
were
flawless.
Down here for part of the morning. Yeah,
we were working on it yesterday. We were working on it today. So that's what happens live sometimes.
Yeah, Jameson, it looks like this isn't going to work. Everything is glitchy. So what we're going to do is reschedule, and we're going to go live here and at least continue the program for the next 45 minutes or so. Our apologies. Can you hear us, by the way? Okay. All right. Are we live now?
Yeah, you're still live.
Okay, so we're still live. Don't see any image up there. So for those of you joining us, this is the Tesla Roadster podcast, and we had to abort the Jameson Cummings guest spot today. We're going to fix our hardware here and redo this next week. But in the meantime, we can continue with some of the items that we were going to cover today during the Tesla Roadster podcast. And Mark Schaffner has joined me. We have a few agenda items, but one of the questions that came in from some of the Roadster owners was, what is the maximum range of an R80 upgrade? What may it actually attain? Now remember, there are two versions. There's a 2016 version, which they aborted eventually, and then there's a 2021 version, which is the latest version. The best perspective we have on that is we have VIN 711 that just got an R80 upgrade about 2 months ago. And when we got it back from Tesla, it actually charged at 225 miles in standard mode. We have not yet attempted to do a range mode, and we will report what that is. But some of the other people have. Someone in Texas said, when they are new, they typically get 335 in full range mode, 335 miles, and standard mode will come in at about 225 miles, which is exactly where ours is at. And this, by the way, is also a 2021 R80 pack. Someone else mentioned that they've installed theirs for about a year and a half, and it's never gone over 268 in range mode is what we're assuming here. We never got anywhere close to that in standard mode. And then someone else chimed in and said that they've got in range mode, they were getting 305 miles. But it doesn't say what the vintage is, 2016 or 2021. Now, as you know, there are some problems with the 2016 pack. And Tesla is doing their final validation, and we'll have results Friday this week to see what their findings are. And instead of just one of the Roadsters that we had, they now have both of the Roadsters that we're having or that we're exhibiting these symptoms at the Tempe Service Center now, and they're doing their final analysis to come up with a cause and effect or a cause and origin for this problem.
Yes, and the range expansion for the R80 for that 80 kilowatt battery does seem to be pretty much in line with what we've seen on the older 53 kilowatt hour batteries. By the way, just as a quick interruption here, I know that we're working to get TikTok live as well, so We may see the back of Richard's head in the frame in just a minute, but that'll be okay. We're just trying to bring our TikTok audience on as well. So the 225 isn't that bad, though. I mean, we're talking about a 13-year-old car that still has 225 miles of range. I have a 2012 Model S. You know, I drive that, and when I first started driving it, we were sitting around 240 for a full charge and about 219, which for my 85 kilowatt hour battery was pretty good. And now I get 203 or so. It's still a pretty good charge. And so when I think, wow, I could get a little sporty car with 225 miles, yeah, I'll sign up for that.
And of course, the new battery that Sandy Monroe is pretty excited about, the Amprius battery, which, what were the specs on that again?
Oh, that one's the 500 watt hours per kilogram. And that means the equivalent to, if it were put on a Roadster, would change that Roadster range from 225 miles to almost 500 miles. Wouldn't that be something, having a 500-mile range on a Roadster?
You know, those of us that drive Roadsters, they're not really a good long-distance car. They're a tad uncomfortable and no luggage space. So that 500-mile range, if the battery is capable of that, would probably be better served to reduce the size of the battery and reduce the weight, which would give us much better performance with that Tesla Roadster. Did we bring TikTok live just now, guys?
We are live on TikTok.
Okay. Let me just introduce for a moment here, TikTok audience. Welcome, TikTok. We've had some technical problems this afternoon. We had a special guest, Jameson Cummings, the first Tesla tech, that was joining us, and try as we may, our hardware failed us. You said it was Microsoft's problem?
I think it's Microsoft's problem this time, yes.
You got to blame somebody, yeah. But welcome, TikTok. We appreciate you guys joining us as well. And so we're covering some Roadster topics. One of the interesting things that I found was that the specifications for a Roadster, 2,723 pounds total weight. That's pretty light.
That's a very light little car, especially considering that battery pack is almost 1,000 pounds of that weight.
Exactly. The front axle load is 1144 and the rear axle load is 2147. It's almost 1,000 pounds heavier, and that's where that battery comes in.
That's right where that battery's at. It sits behind the driver's seat there, and it sits just almost exactly over that rear axle.
So the other statistics I found interesting was the ride height or ground clearance, and 5.12 inches. That explains why you bottom out so much with a Tesla Roadster.
Yeah, you know, and honestly, I think that seat is probably about 6.12 inches off the ground, because it's really low down there too.
So we have a German Roadster owner that was joining us today, Marco Nolte. If you're there, Marco, let us know. We've got questions that will be streaming in, so if any of you have questions, let us know who you are, where you're from, and if you want to share your Roadster VIN with us, that would be of interest to some of the audience as well.
Now, Pete, you and I were talking earlier when we were talking about the 2016 versus the later 2021 battery packs, and you said that you've heard some more information about the warranty on these battery packs.
Yeah, we thought that it was a 5-year warranty pack, and we got that from 2 customers actually that had purchased them in 2016. It turns out one of our other customers just recently got a hold of Tesla, actually a few days ago, and it turns out that the warranty for the 3.0 batteries comes with a 2-year or 25,000 mile warranty, whichever comes first. So it's not as long as we thought.
No, it's not. And as far as we know, that applies to the 2016 packs as well as the newer 2021 design packs, correct?
As far as we know, yeah. We're still, of course, waiting for an official confirmation from Tesla on a number of issues, including this performance issue with the 2016 packs.
By all means.
It looks like we've got a TikTok. Jason D is joining us. He says, hello, friends. Great to see you again. And he is watching us from Nova Scotia, Canada. Well, welcome, Jason.
Welcome, Jason, and thanks for joining us this afternoon.
The picture behind us, which for the TikTok audience is still a green screen, is looks like a Arctic white Roadster. And we usually have different pictures on the backdrops. Eventually we'll switch over to scenery shots, but for now we're exhausting our Tesla Roadster image library.
That's a beautiful shot on that Roadster. Is that partially animated, or is that just because of the type of background that it was shot on that it looks like a partial animation there?
You know, it almost looks like either animation, like you say, or a wrap, because it's got some glossiness to it that you normally don't see in an Arctic white.
Yeah, that sure is beautiful. Well, we have a few people coming in from TikTok this afternoon. Panopticon has joined us on TikTok. Good afternoon. And he's asking, is it possible to come up with a way to exchange the batteries easier than the way it is right now?
You know, that's the million-dollar question. And as the market matures, battery swapping is going to become way more important. Currently in a Tesla Roadster, you've got an almost 1,000-pound battery pack. You have to remove some suspension components to take it out, and then you have to crack it open to work on it. It's not the most elegant, easy method of changing batteries. Now with the later models, you know, even the Model S, Tesla was working for a while on an automated battery swap out system. And, but it still requires an enormous amount of hydraulics, you know, the ability to handle 1,200 pounds, and a lot of hardware removal. I think there are well over 100 bolts that hold a Tesla Model S battery into the floor. You know, early on, a 3 years ago or so, Tesla was quite serious about doing battery swaps on the Model S. So in one of the shareholder meetings, Elon was standing up on stage, and everyone was waiting to see what would happen, and they drove a Model S out behind him, and he said, watch, we're going to swap this battery pack in 90 seconds. We're talking about a minute and a half, mind you.
Wow.
It takes us infinitely longer than that to
Oh
even
yeah,
drop
it
a
does.
battery,
I've watched our guys work.
And sure enough, within 90 seconds, this car drove off with a new battery pack. And I swear, if we were able to see underneath the stage, there was probably a Formula One pit crew down below there that was doing all of this, because there's no way that our guys would have done it that quickly.
Oh, absolutely. Teriyaki Walk has joined us from TikTok as well. Asked kind of a basic question that that's good for us to remind our viewers. He says, hello, what's the theme of this TikTok live stream? Well, it's Tesla, specifically Tesla Roadster, specifically the Tesla first generation Roadster.
And for those of you interested in the broader Tesla products, or even some of the other EVs in the market, our Tuesday and Thursday podcasts, which take place at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, reach broader audiences and talk about all of the other brands, still focused a lot on Tesla. But the function of this Wednesday 4 o'clock podcast is for the Tesla Roadster owners or the Tesla Roadster community.
It is. We should also mention, Pete, that our Tuesdays and Thursdays podcast, we cover all things alternative energy. We don't. We typically try to stay more in the Tesla realm, but really anything that's going on. I mean, we even branch into AI sometimes, so it's exciting. Definitely come check us out on those days as well.
Well, certainly, and of course some of the solar cars. We talk about Aptera often, and
Oh,
Solo
yes,
and
we do.
Lightyear, and yeah, some of the other cool new cars that are coming out. It looks like we have another question. Panopticon from TikTok. Thanks for using clamps instead of bolts. Oh, why not use clamps instead of bolts? Well, the fundamental reason there is, I think, safety. Bolts definitely, you could torque them, for example. And battery swaps are very infrequent. Many people drive their car the entire period of ownership without ever changing the battery as they trade up, trade down, or change cars. So that's one of the reasons. And we really do not think that battery swaps are viable in the EV world.
No, I think you and I are in agreement that the future of charging in the EV world is such that things such as wireless charging are going to take place and really even largely replace the cords. And that even makes less reason to do battery swaps than we have right now. If you can go, drive up to a restaurant or drive up to your shopping center, and while you're in shopping and getting groceries, your car is charging and you didn't have to do anything, then why would you ever need to swap a battery?
Certainly. Have a TikTok question from Wayne Hill. welcome, Wayne. Wasn't the Roadster based on a Lotus? Very astute. It was actually the Lotus Elise. And the original plan was to electrify a Lotus Elise sports car and call it a Tesla Roadster. Well, things went awry. Turns out the large battery pack wouldn't quite fit into the frame, the body. And so they ended up changing not only the frame on a Tesla or on the Lotus Elise, but also all the body panels, which is, of course, a problem for us today in the aftermarket service world, because we can't go to Lotus and buy that fender or that rear hatch or that quarter panel or the door. And unfortunately, the vendors that originally made these custom panels for the Tesla Roadster are gone, and no one is making any reproductions. Fundamentally because there aren't enough customers to justify the return on investment they need in order to invest in the molds and the dies and all of that to recreate this stuff. But yes, you're right, it was originally the Lotus Elise, and so Lotus is in the Tesla Roadster DNA, very much so. They say that today only about 7% of the Roadster is original Lotus Elise. And it's mostly in some of the suspension components, but that's about it.
YouTube, Edward Crump has joined us. He's asking a question that says, when do you think the new hairpin rotor design went into production?
You know, I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is?
I know the hairpin rotor design in general is a design for the electric motor itself and how the internals of the motor work. Beyond that, I don't know much about that at this point. So that's something that, Edward, we can get back to you on, and we'll definitely do the research for it, though.
Yeah. TikTok, Panopticon, saying, when is Gruber coming to Los Angeles? We need more shops. We do need more shops globally, and unfortunately, it is a new disruptive technology. There really aren't any training courses available yet, or schools that teach mechanics or teach them how to pivot from doing mechanical work to doing electric vehicle work, except for one, and I think Mark's going to tell us about that.
That's right. There is one school out there that does do some training for Tesla techs. We talked about that not too long ago. It was Rio Hondo Community College, based out of Whittier, California. They have a program that they have developed in conjunction with Tesla, and it helps to train their technicians and get them ready to be able to do work both in the service centers and doing in manufacturing and corporate.
And it is, by the way, supported by Tesla. The acronym START doesn't quite match the description of the course. It probably got sidetracked along the way somewhere, but
probably did.
But the course does include a number of key EV type maintenance components, including high voltage battery, drivetrain technology, firmware, and it looks like after a successful graduation from a course like this, the successful students can basically get a job at any of these EV manufacturers, not just Tesla, but Lucid and Rivian, all the rest of them as well.
Yes, by all means. Jesus Melendez from YouTube has joined us. He asks, how is all that copper wiring holding up? Are there any concerns on degradation? That's a good question about the electric motors, I think.
Yeah. You know, the motor technology we're finding in these EVs seems to be bulletproof, except for the leaking gaskets and seals in the early Model S's. Take, for example, the Tesla Roadster. We have worked on literally hundreds of these cars, and we have never had to replace a drive motor. They're extremely well constructed, and that's generally not where the failures occur, is in that portion of the mechanical part of the car.
You know, what I've seen in my experience with electric motors in general, I've got an old compressor. It's a 1974 Craftsman. Runs on a little 220 3/4 horsepower electric motor. I actually had that motor apart to do some cleaning and servicing because it was all dusty in the inside. Those copper wires look like they had been put in last week.
Is that right? Yep.
I was really surprised. I figured there would be some sort of either degradation or oxidation or something, and there was nothing at all. So I'm not really surprised that the electric motors that are sealed on these electric vehicles are going to hold up for a long time like that.
And what's amazing is a three-phase AC induction motor is well over 100 years old. It was what Nikola Tesla actually, pioneered and invented. It looks like YouTube. Zane Courtney joined us. Zane, how are you? Zane is one of our co-hosts many times here in our podcasts. And he's saying, can't wait for the new Roadster to race the Lamborghini Revuelto one day. You know, they have these Italian bull names. And
Yes.
I'm never quite sure how to pronounce them, but that's what Lamborghini does. They name them after successful bullfighting bulls. So this is the Revuelto. The only thing I can say about that, Zane, is Lamborghini is electrifying. By 2024, I believe they have suspended any ice construction, any further ice construction. And let's not forget, Lamborghini built some of the most exquisitely designed, engineered ice engines on the planet. Those 12-cylinder engines, high RPMs and, of course, lots of maintenance, but wonderfully designed cars with lots of power. They are going electric as well, so it'll be EV to EV at some point in time.
Well, and this is going to be one of Lamborghini's hybrids. I think this is the one that is replacing the Aventador. So this one's is a plug-in hybrid that they just announced.
So you struggle the same way. That it's
Oh.
Aventador.
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely.
Aventador, yes. YouTube Shorts, Paul Bodybuilder. We've talked to you before. Thank you for joining us again. He says, cool glasses. Hi, fellas. He's from Windmore, Pennsylvania.
Hi, good to have you on this afternoon, Paul.
So we were really expecting to spend a lot of time interviewing Jameson Cummings, who is full of historical footnotes and lots of stories. So I'm going to continue to move into some of the few agenda items we had, and we'll continue to entertain questions. But if we can throw up image number, it is called Tiny Chip-1. And what I wanted to show, and since this is a Roadster-specific podcast, is some of the problems that we run into when we service these cars. This item that you see here is a HVAC control module in a 2.0 Roadster series. And if we can throw up an image called Tiny Chip-1, that will show this box opened up. It sits underneath, by the way, the hood vanes in the front of the car. Mm-hmm. It is exposed to the elements. If you're in a rainy climate, it's going to get wet. And that's part of the problem with this assembly is there's an LED that is mounted on the side panel, which is not waterproof, it turns out. There's no seal there. And as these things age, the seals or the gaskets around the end caps become compressed, and eventually you get water ingress. And there we have the image for the inside of the board. Now, what I'm showing to the upper right-hand corner there is a recent repair that we're involved in right now. This is a tiny chip, and it is so small, we have to remove this under a microscope and resolder it under a microscope. And if we can go to image number Tiny Chip-2 next, we'll show you the problem with this. The first problem was finding the chip. Now, there are no schematics for this part. We've asked Tesla, they don't seem to have it. Mm-hmm. No one's been able to come up with anything. So what we do is we have to reverse engineer, create our own schematics, wiring diagrams, test points, and oftentimes even build test equipment that will allow us to do a plug and play with devices like this after a repair or before to help us diagnose what's wrong. Now, that tiny microscopic chip that you saw there is off in the upper right-hand corner. And it is feeding a PIC processor to the left. This is a small processor that has firmware that runs on it.
Okay.
Now, we finally found the tiny chip. And again, it was under a microscope. We had to find the part numbers. The one that was broken was illegible, so we had another one we were able to get the part number off of and finally source that part. Now, it gets even stranger here. Oftentimes, with parts like this that are 15 years old, you find that the chips are obsolete. They're no longer in production. And try to find them is difficult. If you're lucky, you'll find a distributor somewhere on the globe that has old inventory. And if they realize that no one else has it and you're in a bind, the price just suddenly jumped exponentially to some new value. But we have to buy them anyway. So we were able to source both of these chips because that tiny little chip created a problem in that PIC processor when it shorted. Now we have a new problem, which is there's firmware that runs on this PIC processor, and we don't have the firmware. So just to give you an idea of how difficult it is to keep these old 15-year-old custom proprietary cars in many ways running, because these were not high volume parts that went in these cars. It would have been nice if this HVAC controller was an off-the-shelf item that was used in VWs and Ferraris and Mercedes and some other cars, because then you have a pretty good shot at still being able to get a part like this, but they weren't. Many of these parts in the Roadster were custom developed for the Roadster, because remember, the Roadster was really the first EV that went into production, except for the EV1. So if we can go to image number tinychip-3, you can see what one of our engineers, our chief engineer, actually uses as his main tool to work on these types of parts. Now, if Jameson was with us, we were doing a pre-interview basically with him earlier, and he also, oh, by the way, here we're seeing the microscope that Ken uses to isolate tiny little parts like this and read the numbers off them so that he can try to order them. But anyway, getting back to Jameson, I found it humorous when he said, because he fixes Roadsters now himself up in the Bay Area, and he said, you know, fixing Roadsters nowadays is a bit different than it was back in the day, because back in the day, when you had a defective car and you had a bad part, you simply went to the parts room, pulled it, and installed it, and you were done. Nowadays, it's different because those parts are not available often. And you have to end up doing what we're doing here, which is reverse engineering, troubleshooting, sourcing parts, and then hoping that you don't have a firmware problem like we do with this one.
Yeah, this has been par for the course for us now on the Roadsters for, goodness, 6 or 7 years that we've been doing this. And the parts are getting more scarce over time.
You know, we've got a YouTube comment here from Dan, AI6XG Kellen, who says it's PIC, not PIK. Thank you for pointing that out. In our description here, we did put PIK.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Jet Lee from TikTok has also joined us this afternoon, and he has a couple of questions. He's asking, what's the average lifespan of the EV batteries, and then what's the cost of replacement?
That is also an interesting question, in that the Roadster really is the first car that is teaching us how long these multi-cell cylindrical battery packs will last. The Roadster, for example, came out in 2008. And for all intents and purposes, a lot of these batteries were developed in 2007 or even 2006. But the car has been in play now for 15 years. And you know what? The majority of those cars are still running on the original legacy battery packs. I have Tesla Roadster VIN number 5 at home. It came from Lotus, actually. The first 11 Roadsters were actually built by Lotus in the UK. And it still has the original battery pack, and it charges to 152 miles every time I charge. So the simple answer is we don't know how long the multi-cell cylindrical packs are going to last, except for one version, which is the 2016 packs, which came out as a replacement to the legacy packs. And those are, it looks like, are failing 8 years after they were installed. We'll have a lot more information about this within the next few weeks as Tesla validates and corroborates some of our findings.
Yeah, you can find a video that goes into the potential for end of life on the 2016 R80 enhanced battery packs. We have that video up on YouTube.
And by the way, for those of you that are on TikTok, if you want to see the full experience, the images were popping up. If you switch over to YouTube, you can see not only the images were popping up, but also the background picture instead of a green screen.
That's right.
So another thing that I wanted to cover with you, we have another Roadster that just popped up for sale today. And can we throw up that picture there, guys? It's the Sterling Silver Roadster, VIN 777. And we have a Roadster Matchmaking service. It's completely free to both seller and buyer on our website, grubermotors.com. And as customers decide they want to sell their car or want to buy a Roadster, they generally check our site, and we've got over 50 of them out there. We've sold over 50 of them. 2 of them just sold within the last month, actually. The price that you see on this one is still going to be adjusted by the customer. We put that out there as a placeholder, and we encourage the customers nowadays that the Roadster valuation really isn't what it was a year ago. A year ago, you were able to get $120,000 to $130,000 for a functioning Roadster, non-pedigreed. If it was a Signature 100, it would go for more. If it was celebrity owned, it would go for more, or extraordinarily low mileage. One of the low mileage Roadsters last year sold for it was 1,300 miles, and it sold for $200,000 or 212, somewhere in there.
Right. Now, Jet Li had asked us one other question when he asked us the 2 questions, and that was the cost of the replacement pack. I believe the cost of the replacement pack on these Roadsters with Tesla is $29,000. That upgrades you from the original pack or to the newer R80 pack that's been redesigned starting in 2020 and 2021, and is that install pretty much, from what we've seen on invoices from Tesla, is an all-inclusive price. You may pay sales tax depending on where you live.
Yeah, tax is always added. I think ours came out to about $32,000.
Yeah, a little bit less than that.
If you're, however, out of the country, and that's in the U.S. stateside, they have to add things like customs and shipping and VAT taxes. So some people overseas have paid as much as $40,000 for these replacement battery packs. In fall of last year, the lead time on these packs was a year, 2 or 3. Tesla finally decided we're no longer going to allow elective battery changes. And these were customers that had a functioning pack, but decided they really wanted the extra range, or they wanted to get something newer that would last longer to future-proof their car. By the way, the original pack was 53 kW. The replacement packs are 80 kW. And so you do get some more powers available in that newer battery pack.
Now, Bill Wood has joined us again this afternoon, too.
Hello, Bill.
Good afternoon, Bill. He has a good comment for us. He says, me with the golf cart battery pack was $7,000. Holy cow!
Yeah, it's a lot of money. You know, a lot of these cars that are going to auction now, people are taking out, especially the Model S, they're taking out the modules. There are 16 of them in an 85 kW pack, and they're going into golf carts. They have to tweak the voltages a little bit because those motors are usually 36 volts in a golf cart. So you have to kind of play with the configuration, a combination of parallel and series. But the other thing I worry about when they do that is thermal management. I don't know if they're doing anything about that because, and of course, thermal management is vital for lithium-ion packs, as we know.
Absolutely. Last thing I'd want to see is some sort of golf cart sitting on the golf course that's burning like a Roman candle.
Yeah. So if we can go back to that Roadster for sale picture for a moment there, I wanted to describe to the audience there some of the things that we end up posting on the cars for sale. You can buy, of course, a Roadster at a variety of places, Carvana at times, Auto Trader, the Bring a Trailer auctions, Sotheby's. The problem that you run into when you're trying to sell something as unique as a Tesla Roadster on an auction site or a site like Carvana, they don't really understand what the car is. A classic example is sometimes these cars go to those sites or to the people that are selling them, or that are selling them, the brokers that are selling them for the seller, and they forget to charge them. We had 3 Roadsters show up here about 4 years ago or so that all 3 of them got bricked because they didn't realize that they needed a continuous charge, or thought that if they went to 0, they could recharge them without any issues.
Yeah, no
like
problem.
you can with a nice car. So We have a lot of recommendations for people selling cars, and we coach them quite a bit on how to list their car. We always ask for a backstory. When people buy Roadsters, it's not your average Ford and Chevy. They want the history. They want the provenance. They want to know, why are they selling it? What's the history on the car? And many of these cars have an interesting history, like Elon autographed it or personally delivered it, or they were the first ones in the state of Indiana with a Tesla Roadster, or it was celebrity owned. There were a lot of celebrity owned Roadsters. The other thing that we have pioneered is some additional statistics when you're selling one of these cars. A Tesla Roadster, there's a parameter that you can pull off the VDS screen, vehicle display screen, called calculated amp hour capacity. And that is a barometer for the health of the battery in the car. Now, this particular one has a CAC value of 130.98. It's not stellar. Some of the really low mileage cars, well preserved, might have a CAC of 150, 154, somewhere in there, although that's rare. The ones that are really high mileage, we've got one in town here that's 110,000 miles, and he's reporting just under 100,000 CAC. But again, if there is a CAC reading and the range is not declining on every charge, that battery is still solid. And if it does begin to decline, that means you have a resistive cell and it needs to make a trip to our shop to get repaired.
Right, the calculated amp hour capacity, if I recall right, Pete, it's simply a measure of the strength of the battery. Without getting too technical on it, it's a higher number of CAC means you have a stronger battery and it will last for longer. But a low CAC value does not necessarily mean you have a bad battery, just that it's going to be one that doesn't charge too much, as much range.
Sure. And that parameter, by the way, is it is used in all the other battery types as well. Batteries are typically rated in not just voltage, 12 volts, 24, whatever, but also amp hours. And amp hours typically tells you the capacity or the size of the battery. We sell a 12 volt 35 amp hour for 135 amp hour battery, for example, which weighs just under 100 pounds. It's huge and it's full of lead. A 12.7 is one of the small ones, or 12.12 that we put into the Roadster for the 12 volt support underneath the front passenger fender. All right, so anyway, if you're interested in Roadsters, I suggest you go to our website. We have a number of them listed, and check it periodically. We are continuously posting more Roadsters. We have a number in play right now that will be posted over the next month. And if you're interested in early warning, we have a pre-qualified buyer list that you can join by just simply letting us know by clicking on the website where it says join the buyer list. Again, all of this is free. And people ask us constantly, well, how can you do this for free? It must cost you something. And it does. This afternoon, I was at a photo shoot, and we were getting one of the sterling silver Roadster ready for sale. It's just one of the pay it forward things that we do for the Tesla Roadster community.
You know, one of my favorite parts of the site personally is the stories. The Roadster is a unique enough vehicle that it has a special value. It has a special place in the hearts of the people who own them. And I've found over time that objects, a Roadster is an object, but that object takes on a lot more significance if you have a good story to go with it. And likewise, a story becomes a good story when there's an object that the story is describing. It's kind of a both direction type of thing. And when you get the two together, it can kind of create something magical. And some of these stories, to me, that's the best way to describe them. It's just, they're good reads. They're almost magical type stories. And you're like, wow, I wish I was there.
You know, one of the other things we give tours daily, of course, at Gruber Motor Company, and one of the things that the visitors like the most is when we point out particular Roadsters and who the celebrity was that owned that at one point in time. We've had Matt Damon's car here, for example. We have Chad West's car, the Red Hot Chili Peppers drummer, here right now. And then we get really pedigreed Roadsters, like a Founder Series number 3 is in our service center right now. Right. And that's even more important than a Signature 100 VIN number 3. And you know, people tend to enjoy that. We don't get as much play with the later platform cars like the Model S, although we've had some low VIN cars there as well.
We've had a few low VIN cars there as well, and you know, and the idea of even an object that would seemingly not have a lot of worth otherwise, when you put a good story with it, can become really valuable and meaningful, like the T0 that we have the remains of hanging on the wall over in the service center.
You know, when we first bought that T0, we could not find the other two. No one knew where they were, and we thought it might be the only one in existence. Since then, however, the other two have surfaced. One, if you want to see a T0 in its full glory with the Honda generator behind it for charging, there's one at the Peterson Auto Museum in Los Angeles. And the second one is owned by an engineer up in the Bay Area. And we don't know the disposition of that yet, but at least it's been accounted for. And they only built 3. That's why we're talking these small numbers.
Yeah, that's what an iconic car that one has become as well, and the real inspiration for the Roadster.
So we will do a much better job next week of having guests and
Yes.
having our technical issues resolved. If you could see what's to the sides of us and behind us here, you would see that this is a pretty complex studio operation, and it has morphed and grown into something fairly complex. So we will be working on our dialing in of the our technical equipment, and it's important because tomorrow we've got Sandy Monroe joining us.
That's right. I'd like to invite everybody tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning, Mountain Standard Time. Sandy Monroe is going to join us on our EVs podcast. We call it the Gruber Motoring Show. So now before we go, it looks like we have a couple of different questions. Bill Wood is asking if we can talk a little bit about Tesla's new 100-year battery. And then Van Goat Wagon has joined us. Van Goat Wagon is one of our longtime listeners. And he is asking if either of us have a Roadster story that we could share.
Absolutely. You know, well, my Roadster number, VIN number 5, is probably a good example, isn't it? It was a car show here in Phoenix about 6 years ago or so, and there was an elderly woman walking around with a prospectus. And initially I thought she had a house for sale. It turns out it was a Tesla Roadster. And she had some nice pictures and specs, and she said, you know, I'm looking for someone to purchase this Roadster. My son-in-law passed away, and you know, we're not going to keep the car. And she was wondering if I knew anybody looking for a Roadster. That was before we had the matchmaking service. And I took her prospectus and I said, I'll do my best, ma'am. I'll see if I can find you a buyer. So this was on a Friday afternoon, I believe. By Sunday, I had talked to my wife. It turns out this was VIN number 5. Now, at that time, Roadsters weren't collectible, and you know, the 5 was a nice footnote, but it wasn't compelling enough for us to you know, buy the car. But we decided, you know, why not? Maybe these cars will be worth something someday, and having an early VIN like number 5 will be significant at some point in the future. Well, that's exactly what ended up happening.
Right.
The cars are collectible, and as soon as this temporary depressed market goes away and improves, I think Roadsters are going to you know, continue to climb in value. So again, having said that, check out our matchmaking site because there's some bargains out there right now. Typically, Roadsters are currently selling in the $85,000 to $95,000 range for a complete functioning Roadster. That's about $30,000 to $40,000 less than they were selling for a year ago. So there are some bargains to be had. For those of you that want stories on Roadsters, there are a couple of places for them. One is on our gallery section on our website, and that's where you can see some of the celebrity-owned Roadsters, how the next owner was able to attain the car, and any stories related to that car. The second one is the cars for sale. We encourage all of the sellers to tell us the backgrounds on the car. And oftentimes, you know, it's just things you don't anticipate. Interesting stories come out of that. So you've got 2 places that you can find some stories on the Roadsters.
Yes. Now, when it comes to the 100-year battery, I don't know that we have a lot of information as of yet. This is one of the reasons why we really enjoy the questions from you, though. You guys in the community are hearing things that sometimes get past us as far as what's going on. I do see that there's an article in Forbes this week about a 100-year battery that's been put out by Tesla researchers. We will definitely have more on that, if not Thursday, because Sandy is going to be on Thursday. We will definitely be able to address that in our upcoming podcast this next Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning.
And what we find is that the battery technology is improving exponentially at this point. There's always a new product every month, it seems like. We had the sodium battery, which reduces the cost because lithium costs $30,000, $38,000 a ton or something like that. Salt is far more plentiful. And now we've got this Amprius battery, which has an enormous high energy density, yet to be revealed, by the way, what their technology is. And it's very difficult to keep up with the technologies, but expect battery technology to be the next quantum leap in technical improvement.
I know that we've heard about things such as graphene batteries and other solid state type batteries that have a claim for a 100-year lifespan as well. So it's not really a surprise to me to hear that there may be a 100-year battery that's in development with Tesla. I think one of the more remarkable videos that I've ever seen was when we had a partner demonstrating for us the graphene battery that they were going to partner with us on. And they took a graphene battery, put it on a discharge with a voltmeter on a gun range, and then proceeded to shoot that battery. Not once, not twice, I think it was 9 times. And even after that battery had been shot with, it had 9 bullet holes in it, it was still putting out just a voltage charge just like it was, and it wasn't catching on fire.
Amazing technologies, yes. It looks like TikTok. Ferrari joined us, and he says, greetings from Uganda. We love it when people come in from all over the globe, and we have been tracking, I believe, where all the visitors come from.
Thank you, Ferrari.
TikTok, Jason D says, I won't miss you and Sandy. I'm ready to learn. Well, tomorrow is the day, and we will have to fix our technical issues before that happens tomorrow. TikTok, Ensala says, did you guys ever get that Roadster that was an Iron Man? You know, there's been some speculation what that VIN was, and I thought I saw on one of the Facebook sites they were talking about that, but off the top of my head, I do not know what VIN number that was or which Roadster that was.
On TikTok, Brandon has come to us as well, and it says, do you guys believe that Aptera will go into production? A lot of people still have doubts.
Well, in yesterday's podcast, we actually had a news announcement that they had a pre-order for 101 Aptera vehicles. And it was a $3.25 million sale, I believe.
Yeah, about $3.25, $3.3 million sale. I have high hopes for Aptera. I think it's a unique technology with a solar panel on top of the car that gives them up to 40 miles on a good day of additional charge over and above electricity. So,
and it's being described as the solar car.
Yes.
Which, that's a correct description of what that car is. And eventually, as the photovoltaics improve, just like they will with battery technology, we won't be limited to 40 miles with that car anymore. And we predict there will be cars that can get a full charge just off of the solar panels that are mounted on the car, or the photovoltaic paint, which is generating electricity as it sits outside.
Yes. Bill Wood has come back with a fun fact. He says they found evidence of crude batteries in the Egyptians' tombs. You know, Bill, I'm going to add my own fun fact, and this comes courtesy of one of our salespeople in our company. He was talking to me about world records and said, you know, what would it take to set a world record to organically charge a lithium-ion battery, like a Tesla battery pack?
Yeah.
And so he actually went out, his name is John, he works over in our communication products group, and did some research. And all we have to do is string together 5.8 million potatoes, and we can make a potato battery that'll charge a lithium-ion battery.
You know, you just reminded me of a power class that we do here periodically, and I teach that here for the critical power salespeople. And to demonstrate how electricity was generated, I would bring in a lemon and with a piece of copper wire and a galvanized roofing nail.
Okay.
And I would stick those into the lemon, a couple of leads coming off of that to an LED, and it illuminates the LED.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it was a simple battery. And at one point, I think we even strung together a dozen lemons with jumper cables in between them, and we were able to power a 12-volt device. So
I think I remember seeing that with the lemons up there, and you guys kept that up there for a couple of weeks even.
yeah, until it smelled, I think.
Yes. Finally, Eric Tech from TikTok from Canada has joined us, and good to have you this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Welcome, welcome. So this Roadster podcast has gone an hour. At least we were going to quit at 5 o'clock, so we're going to wrap things up here. We've got one more question coming in from Bill Wood. As that comes in, we'll share that with you. And for those of you that are Roadster owners, identify yourself. We'd love to hear from you. If you weren't able to catch the podcast, these are always posted on our YouTube channel under the live category. So if you missed it, you can see it, and we find that we get a lot more traction afterwards because a lot of you may be working at the times that we broadcast these, or if you're overseas, you may be asleep.
Yes. To close out, first from Bill Wood and then from Jason D. Bill says, I'd like to run my Tesla off a key lime pie. That sounds like a great way to run a Tesla. And then Jason says, thank you, friends, for your time. Thank you very much, Jason. We look forward to seeing everybody within a week. We're going to try to coordinate with Jamison Cummings, try to see if we can get him on this next week. We will announce it ahead of time to be sure.
Yeah, and I think you'll all find Jamison's background and history compelling and interesting, and we will try to get him on next week as well. Again, the podcasts are Tuesday mornings at 10 Mountain Standard Time, same as Pacific Standard Time now, and Thursday, MST and PST, and then, of course, the Roadster podcast at 4 o'clock. We have other guests that we're scheduling in for this Roadster podcast, and we will be announcing that on various platforms, including TikTok and Facebook and Instagram. And see, I lose track of all of these. Twitter, there, I left that one, almost left that one out.
Yes, even on LinkedIn, we get questions every so often.
That's true, LinkedIn as well. We always appreciate it when you guys join us. We're doing this for you. It's collaborative, and we will spend time to do research and answer any questions that may come in after the podcast as well.
Thank you guys, and good afternoon.